It's time to take a look at what's grabbing the headlines here in France. Our press reviewer, Florence Villeminot, is with us this morning.
Good morning,
Hi to you, Flo. School starting next week, and while French kids are taking advantage of the last moments of summer, the Ministries of the Interior and Education are set to announce a series of measures to improve school security.
That's right, because it's a kind of a weird back-to-school year given the terrorist threat, and Le Parisien is taking a closer look at these security measures that are being announced by the Ministers of the Interior and the Minister of Education. You can see they're talking about schools facing this terrorist threat. Now check out this little graphic here. It explains a little bit more in detail just what these measures are, because they're really wide-ranging. First of all, there'll be measures to ensure that, schools are safer in terms of, barriers at the entrance, gates, windows that aren't as fragile as they currently are. But there are also all sorts of measures to train students in like first aid and things like that. Also, schools will carry out drills throughout the year. Now, of course, you have the classic fire drill, of course, but what's going to be new this year is schools are going to have drills to train students what to do in the case, if there was a case of a terrorist attack on their school, some sort of individual trying to get into the school. So pretty big changes that are going to be taking place in French schools. Now, there'll also be a special bell in schools. You have a fire bell, for instance, but then there'll be a different bell in the case of a terrorist attack. Also, authorities say that school students and teachers that are suspected of being radicalized will now be monitored. There's also going to be a system so that the heads of schools will be alerted by authorities on their phones if ever there's a terrorist attack elsewhere in the country. So you can see a series of wide-ranging measures here.
Indeed, well, frightening almost in some respects. But according to several papers, teachers are concerned about the level of securities in schools at the moment.
That's right. Le Figaro interviews a school psychologist, actually, Patricia Guerous. You can see her here. And she says that currently teachers are not trained sufficiently for crisis management. So this is something that needs to change. Le Parisien, if we go back to that paper, they also interview a man named Philippe Tournier. You can see him here. He's the head of a teachers' union. You can see he's upset about the fact that schools don't have security personnel like they do in shopping malls or in hospitals. Of course, that's very complicated to put in place. But the reason that teachers and schools and authorities are so alarmed by what's going on is because in the wake of the November attacks, ISIS actually directly called for attacks on French schools, saying that they're the antechamber of hell. And so that's why authorities are on such high alert. Now, Le Parisien and other papers say, this is a really depressing and scary situation. Nobody wants their kids to go to school with this fear in them. And a lot of papers have been quick to say, the best arm to fight terrorism is education, and that's why it's so important to put in place these measures.
Well, the Figaro is reporting that Jewish schools, they've been on high alert for decades, haven't they?
That's right. Drastic security measures have been put in place since the 1980s. So Le Figaro says that French public schools may learn a thing or two from Jewish schools, including just a kind of a state of mind, essentially a state of mind of vigilance. This article points out that Jewish families are accustomed to paying very close attention to what's happening around them, what's happening around their schools, and this is something that public schools should learn from.
Let's move on to French politics now. And the former Justice Minister Christiane Taubira says she might make a political comeback.
That's right. You might remember Christiane Taubira. Well, she says she wants to get involved in the 2017 campaign. You can see an interview here in Le Canard Enchaîné. I can become mean. Now, it's mysterious exactly what she wants to do in the campaign, but she could do some damage. She ran for president back in 2002. Now, you might remember that election. That's when Jean-Marie Le Pen made it to round 2 against Jacques Chirac, and he beat the socialist candidate, Lionel Jospin. So people say maybe she could do some damage. So that's what's happening on the left. On the right, remember Nicolas Sarkozy? We were talking about him yesterday. He's made it official. He wants to run for president. So lots of papers are focusing on the aftermath of that. Let's take a look at La Croix. That says that, before he can run for president, he has to win the primary. And so you can see La Croix here talking about the trial of the primary. You can see him here with Alain Juppé, his main rival for now, because there are all sorts of candidates who want to run in this primary. Le Figaro reports that all these candidates are pretending not to care that Sarkozy has thrown his hat into the ring. Juppé, for instance, said that he's taking advantage of his vacation in Canada. Sarkozy is a candidate. Who cares, he says.